Hello, beautiful, wonderful people, and welcome back. Another episode of Glowed Up and Woke. And I'm going to continue on with the material on the science, neuroscience, and physics of intuition, as well as some other spiritual or maybe considered new agey concepts that have empirical based evidence to support these claims. So, to recap, I covered in almost all these videos the work of Rupert Sheldrake on morphogenetic fields, Orc-Ore theory by Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose. Also, Bruce Lipton's work on the cell membrane as a computer chip, as a transceiver of information, and he has a lot of work on the whole crystalline structure of the body and how the body communicates through electromagnetic or through interface, wavelength, frequency, and there's other there's several other scientists who are on this path, but these are the prominent ones that are creating a lot of content on YouTube, so that you can actually just YouTube any of those names: Bruce Lipton, Rupert Sheldrake, or Stuart Hameroff, and get like a more in-depth science. And they're going to give you a little less of the spiritual side, which is kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm wanting to just bridge these understandings and these models so that we have a scientific sort of left brain understanding of our experiences that are sometimes deemed spiritual and just sort of like dismissed because they're spiritual, and if they're spiritual, they're not actual. You know what I mean. So going right into it, this video is going to be about how to use this knowledge that I've recorded in these previous videos about, for example, the brain as an antenna, the field of the heart, and the fact that it communicates and it's all constantly receiving and broadcasting information from fields in the environment, including the fields generated by the hearts of others, and the Schumann resonance, which is the field generated by the Earth. And then, of course, we have planetary bodies, and this can explain a lot of astrology, zodiac signs. If you think of it in terms of morphic resonance, then that's a really cool model for how and why the alignment of the planets could truly affect the development of a child when it's being born, and how the energy is received in the womb, and all these things. That's going to be another video, though, if I go into that, because that requires an in-depth look at what morphogenetic fields really are. I have 2 videos so far on morphogenetic fields, so please help yourself to those if you want to refer to that. What I am doing now, though, is I'm talking about things such as, what does this mean? Like, we're living in a world of resonance. We're living in a world in which these invisible forces really do determine and shape our experience of reality. Everything from the way that the molecules in our cells arrange themselves, to the behavior of our cells, to the way that our brain communicates to the rest of our body, and to the way that we communicate to each other in nonverbal ways beyond body language and beyond just pheromones and chemicals and such things like that. So for the first thing I want to get into is the flow state. I'm sure everybody or most people have heard of what's called the flow state. It's really just a way to describe a state in which you're so present and you've let go of the left brain dominance. You sort of deactivated that left brain so that it's in a more chill state, sort of taking a back seat to the present moment and allowing a balance and a coherence between both hemispheres of the brain. When both hemispheres of the brain are in balance, that's the ideal situation to really be in the moment and perceive reality as it is. When we're not in those states, we're really living out some past programming, which, as I say often, it's not freely chosen. And therefore, if you want to experience freedom in your life, we have to understand how to maintain the connection to the fields in the present moment. The fields, quantum, electromagnetic, all these, they're setting up the invisible energetic structure and flow and sort of pattern of flow for the information, which is determining and creating an invisible grid upon which all the physical stuff becomes built on, right? Everything, every molecule, every subatomic particle, every proton, every electron, all these molecules arrange themselves based on this invisible grid of energy. And a lot of people have seen this with cymatics. If you haven't seen cymatics, I highly encourage you to check out cymatics, because cymatics shows us a visual illustration of how what a frequency, a specific frequency does to, for example, a bunch of sand, like grains of sand. If you put grains of sand on a plate and then you run a specific frequency or a pitch, such as like, that pitch, that sound has a frequency, has a resonance, and that frequency has a specific shape in which it guides all the, you can see it in the sand, and it's doing the same thing to the molecules. It's an interface pattern. Now, these interface patterns are the true language of the brain and how the brain communicates. It has nothing to do with, it does have to do with neurochemicals and all those, but those are secondary, because the field and the electric charge which acts upon the neuron determines how it's signaling, how it communicates, what signal it's going to, how receptive it's going to be. It literally changes the shape of the cell of the neuron. And as Orr theory tells us, the microtubules inside the neurons are able to register the very, very high gigahertz frequency, which is emanating from the Planck scale geometry of space-time. And that's a heavy concept, but as I have said in previous videos, consciousness resides in the space-time fabric of the universe. So I'm not going to go over it again, but it means that everything around us contains information. So in order to best use this information, in order to best navigate this world, we need to understand how do these fields around us affect us, and what can we do. So number one, in order to enter the flow state, one has to feel safe enough to ground. When people are in a state of fight or flight, the left brain stays very dominant, and it doesn't allow the right side of the brain to project the antenna, which I have discussed in other videos. And it's not just the right side of the brain that projects the antenna, it happens with the heart, and there's a whole system of coherence in which harmonic resonance between the field generated by the brain and the field generated by the heart comes into harmonic resonance. When those two fields come into harmonic resonance and they're basically vibing together, they're jamming, they're grooving, they're creating a sound that is in harmony with each other, then they come into harmony with the earth. The whole system, the fields of the body are able to plug into the earth. And that is a necessary component of the flow state. And it won't happen so long as you're trying to figure out life with your left side of your brain, if you're trying to do the math on what the next choice and decisions should be. So meditation, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about, is a very powerful practice for getting into a habit and having the ability to access at will a state of coherence. When we're in states of meditation, our heartbeats and our brain hemisphere wavelength, the delta, we have different brainwave activities. So there's delta, theta, then alpha, beta, and gamma. When there's coherence between that wavelength and the activities of the mind, the activities of the brain, with the breath, with the heartbeat, and therefore the pulse, and then also the gut is a very important component. When that coherence is established, which is a natural result of meditation, by calming oneself and deactivating the sympathetic nervous system, which automatically activates the parasympathetic nervous system. We're in a state of feeling safe and able to receive and give true living information. And this is the living information which is creative, right? So in my opinion, that's the most spiritual thing you can do, is be creative, because what is spiritual but to reach towards God and that which is of God, not so much of the physical world, but it's the creator aspect of reality. The physical world is the created, is the creation, and then the creative aspect is happening in the invisible realm, which I've explained several times. These invisible forces are acting upon what we consider reality, the physical reality, and are determining the structure, the shape, the density, and therefore the function of all the particles and subatomic particles and molecules that make up our reality. And therefore, it's very, very powerful to get on that side, on the flip side of the screen, the invisible side of the screen. There's also a few other concepts to consider. The gamma, as I was saying, we know that the delta is the deep state of brain hemisphere balance, where it's really slow. It's a really slow frequency. It's about 4 hertz and to 0 hertz. And that typically only happens in deep sleep, but it also can happen in deep meditation. And apparently only very, very advanced meditationalists do this. And when you enter that state, you're able to perceive a oneness reality, meaning that you transcend the duality of polarity of good and bad, hot, cold, so there's no more suffering. Because duality and time are really the gateways into suffering. And maybe that's another video. But when we're in the very present moment and we're connected, tuned in to the higher frequencies of the cosmic quantum web, which I call it, or just spirit or God, however you want to call it, there's orchestrating field intelligence, consciousness, which is greater than ourselves and which we all tune to. Everything from the level of particles to cells to single cell anemia, bacteria, all plants, and then the planets, and then the solar system and the Milky Way. All the galaxies all have this torus field, and the torus field is pulling in information and broadcasting information, pulling in information and broadcasting information. And this information is what's directing and guiding the behavior of all things in manifest creation. So cover that, and then the next thing I wanted to cover is what this means as far as your choices for. I've made a video about how I like to work out outdoors. The reason for that is that outdoors, these resonance, the Schumann resonance, and other forces, like there's radiation. There's still some radiation in nature, but it's a different kind of radiation, and the radiation that is produced in nature is in harmonic resonance with our biology, whereas the radiation that you get from a cell tower or from the TV screens that are in a gym, for example, are not so much in harmonic. In fact, they can be very, very dissonant. And I'm going to wrap up this video here because I am out of time, but I'll make a follow-up video to continue this one. And I hope you enjoy the material, and I hope to see you back soon. Blessings. Sana.